C and on the floor B, all the girls they adore me. Oh yes.
Some of the most iconic voices in hip-hop history almost weren't the voices on the record at all. A beat handed to somebody else first. A verse ghost-written and given away. A persona built for a completely different performer. 10 real songs still on YouTube, right now, that almost belong to somebody else entirely. Here's exactly how each one ended up in the hands of the artist we actually remember. If stories like this are your thing, hit subscribe right now. Let's get into number 10. Number 10. Tupac Shakur. Before the world knew him as Tupac, before Death Row, before any of the albums that made him a legend, Tupac Shakur spent his earliest days in the music industry, performing under an entirely different stage name, MC New York. He'd started experimenting with that name as early as 1989, while attending poetry classes taught by Layla Steinberg, a mentor who would go on to become his manager and eventually connect him with the wider hip-hop industry. Hired afterward as a roadie and backup dancer for the Bay Area group Digital Underground, the teenage Shakur used that same alias for his very first appearance on a professional recording. That recording was Same Song, included on the soundtrack to the 1991 comedy Nothing But Trouble, marking Tupac's actual recording debut on a commercially released project. He also appeared on screen in the accompanying performance scene alongside the rest of Digital Underground, years before Juice or Poetic Justice gave him any real acting profile of his own. It was only after signing his own solo deal with Interscope Records later that same year that he dropped the MC New York name entirely and adopted Tupac, the identity the world would come to know for the rest of his career. The name itself makes a strange kind of sense once you know his backstory. Tupac was actually born in New York City in June of 1971, and only moved first to Baltimore and later to the Bay Area as a teenager, meaning the stage name he briefly carried was, in its own way, a nod to exactly where he'd started out before reinventing himself entirely on the opposite coast. A rapper who'd go on to sell over 75 million records worldwide, get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in his very first year of eligibility, and become one of the most influential and studied artists in music history, spent his very first credited appearance on Wax under a name almost nobody remembers today, buried inside a forgettable early 90s comedy soundtrack most casual fans have never even heard of.
Check baby 1 2. Check baby 1. Let's go.
Number 9. Rex N Effect. Teddy Riley had just built a multi-million-dollar recording studio in Virginia Beach when he brought his brother Markel's group, Rex N Effect, in to record their sophomore album, Hard or Smooth, in 1992. For the album's centerpiece single, Riley planned to contribute his own guest verse on the track, stepping out from behind the boards to rap himself for once, rather than simply producing for someone else.
Shake it now, shake it. She can spend every birthday butt naked.
He turned to a teenage protege from his own hometown to help write it, a then unknown local kid named Pharrell Williams, years before anyone had heard of the Neptunes or NERD, let alone imagined he'd become one of the most successful producers and songwriters in modern music. Pharrell wrote Riley's entire guest verse for Rump Shaker, officially credited as one of the song's several songwriters, alongside Riley and the group's own members, in what became the very first hit song Pharrell ever worked on in his entire career, a full decade before his name became synonymous with pop radio.
Now make the booty stop. Now drop and do the booty walk. The way you're shaking your
Rump Shaker exploded into a massive crossover hit, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, held off the top spot only by Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, a genuinely enormous commercial peak for a group that had already lost an original member and nearly disbanded entirely a few years earlier.
Body is soft, making me wanna squish up. More just in the game, a rumper like a...
For years afterward, rumors circulated that Pharrell had actually co-produced the track alongside Riley, largely because his name became so closely associated with hit records once the Neptunes took off. The song's actual producer, Ty Fife, later set the record straight publicly in a detailed interview, confirming Pharrell's real contribution was strictly lyrical, writing Riley's rap and nothing more, while crediting Pharrell as a genuine talent even in that smaller role. A teenager who hadn't yet formed the production duo that would go on to shape pop and hip-hop for the next 2 decades, got his very first real industry credit ghostwriting someone else's verse on one of 1992's biggest singles, years before the world knew his name at all. 2 down, 8 to go, and these stories only get harder to believe from here. If this channel is putting you onto stories you can't find anywhere else, hit that subscribe button before we keep going. Alright, back to it. Number 8. Big L. Producer Lord Finesse built a beat for Big L's debut album.
I'm coming straight out the NYC. I'm down with digging in the crates and I'm...
Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, sampling the piano loop from DeBarge's 1983 song Stay With Me for the track MVP, released as the album's second single in 1995, with a separate music video built around a different sample entirely.
None I make crews run, I get fools done. Got 10 fingers but only use.
Big L had spent real time that year touring as an opening act on the Notorious B.I.G.'s own tour, performing that exact song live in front of Biggie's own audiences night after night, months before Biggie's own version reached anyone's ears. Later that same year, Biggie released his own version built around the identical DeBarge sample, One More Chance, Stay With Me, remix, which became a massive hit, eventually going platinum and tying the record at the time for the highest debuting single in Billboard Hot 100 history, right alongside Michael and Janet Jackson's Scream.
Coming straight out the NYC, peace to the Kid Capri. I'm in.
Lord Finesse, who was also personally present in the studio during the recording of Biggie's debut album, Ready to Die, having produced Suicidal Thoughts himself, has said directly that he believes Biggie's camp got the idea to use that specific sample from hearing Big L perform MVP live during the tour, since the timeline simply doesn't work any other way. He's been blunt about it in interviews, saying if he'd known Big L's version came first, he never would have let the sample be reused for Biggie at all. Big L's MVP never came close to matching the commercial scale of Biggie's remix, and Big L himself was murdered in a drive-by shooting in Harlem in February of 1999, at just 24 years old. Years before he'd ever get full credit for popularizing the very sample that helped make one of Biggie's biggest hits into a genuine cultural phenomenon. The same iconic piano loop everyone associates with one of Biggie's signature songs was actually used first by a different rapper entirely. One who was literally on tour with Biggie's own camp when it happened, performing the same sample live months before the world ever heard the version that made it famous. Number 7. Mobb Deep, Havoc and Prodigy, still going by the name Poetical Prophets at the time, were close personal friends with a young Sean Puffy Combs, years before Bad Boy Records existed as a real company, having met him through the New York party circuit, while Combs was still working at Uptown Records. When Combs was fired from Uptown in 1993 and began building his own label from scratch, he approached the duo directly with an offer nobody could have predicted. He wanted them to be Bad Boy's very first signed act, ahead of even the Notorious B.I.G., who hadn't yet been introduced to him at that point.
Things I dig. No time to dwell on that cause my brain reacts.
There was only one condition. Combs told them bluntly that their name needed to change before he'd sign them. Feeling poetical profits simply didn't fit what he was building for his new label's identity. Rather than negotiate further, the duo walked away from the offer entirely, brainstorming a new name for themselves on paper while hanging around Def Jam's own offices around the same time. Eventually landing on Mobb Deep, almost by accident, during that same session. At nearly the exact same moment, a Source magazine editor named Matty C, who'd since taken an A&R job at Steve Rifkin's new label, Loud Records, offered them a competing deal after hearing their reworked demo. They chose Loud, releasing Shook Ones Part 2 as the lead single from their sophomore album The Infamous in 1995, a song now widely considered one of the greatest hardcore hip-hop records ever made, and later ranked among Rolling Stone's 50 greatest hip-hop songs of all time.
Infamous, you heard of us. Official Queensbridge murderers. The mob comes.
The Notorious B.I.G. became Bad Boy's breakout star instead, brought in by two different A&R men, Mr. C and Matty C, almost immediately after Mobb Deep passed on the very same label.
Meanwhile, back in Queens, the realness and foundation. If I die, I couldn't.
Hip-hop's entire trajectory could have looked completely different if Sean Combs had simply let two teenagers from Queensbridge keep the group name they already had, rather than insisting on a change that ultimately sent them somewhere else entirely.
The way I make the crowd go wild. Sit back, relax, won't smile.
Number 6. Wu-Tang Clan. RZA had already been dropped by Tommy Boy Records following a failed solo deal when he retreated to Staten Island and assembled 9 rappers from his own neighborhood and Brooklyn into what became Wu-Tang Clan, a group whose entire founding concept was built around eventually launching individual solo careers once the collective established its own name. Their very first group recording session, the one that produced Protect Your Neck, their independently released debut single, was funded almost entirely with spare quarters the group scraped together themselves, totaling somewhere around $300 total.
I give an order to my peeps across the water to go and snatch up props all around.
The session took place in a walk-in closet connected to a living room, using hand-me-down recording equipment that had once belonged to a completely different local group entirely. There was no label money behind it, no studio budget, and no guarantee anyone outside their own neighborhood would ever hear the finished product at all. RZA built the entire track's sound around gritty, deliberately lo-fi samples pulled straight from obscure Hong Kong kung fu films, a stylistic choice born partly out of financial necessity and partly out of genuine creative vision he'd been developing for years. Protect Your Neck spread almost entirely through word of mouth and college radio play before major labels started a genuine bidding war for the group. With RZA reportedly negotiating an unusual contract clause that allowed every member to sign individual solo deals with other labels while remaining part of the collective. This eventually led to Wu-Tang Clan's 1993 debut album, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers, going on to influence an entire generation of hip-hop production and launching nearly a dozen individually successful solo careers over the following decade. A song recorded in a closet, funded with pocket change, scraped together by 9 broke friends, using equipment borrowed from another act entirely, became the foundation of one of the most influential and commercially enduring groups in the entire history of the genre. Number 5. DJ Quik. David Blake, known as DJ Quik, recorded what would become his debut album on a basic Tascam 4-track recorder. Originally intending it purely as a homemade mixtape, he planned to sell directly out of the trunk of his car in his own Compton neighborhood. Nothing more ambitious than that. He'd already built a real local reputation through an earlier mixtape called The Red Tape, made with future collaborators, Second to None, and AMG, and used that same buzz as a springboard for his next project.
The other brothers Tang, behind the jingle, yo, Quik is the name.
A Profile Records representative named Dave heard Quik's self-made cassettes circulating locally and personally sought him out, offering him a real recording contract on the spot after hearing what he'd already built, alone in his own bedroom.
Now can we get back on the tip of the reel on the door?
Quik signed what was reportedly the label's first ever six-figure deal, an enormous show of confidence in an unproven 19-year-old artist, and the label paid to have the entire project properly re-recorded in Los Angeles' famous Westlake Studios, the exact same facility where Michael Jackson had recorded Thriller years earlier.
I let 'em know, Quik is the name.
Released in January of 1991 as Quik is the Name, the reworked album went platinum, launched 2 genuine hit singles in Born and Raised in Compton and Tonight, with the latter climbing into the top 50 of the Billboard Hot 100, and helped establish DJ Quik as one of the defining voices and producers of West Coast hip-hop for the following 3 decades. A real bidding war even broke out between Profile and rival label Select Records, once word of the original mixtape started spreading through the Los Angeles rap scene. A cassette tape somebody was originally planning to sell out of a car trunk in Compton ended up recorded in the exact same studio as one of the best-selling albums of all time, and became a platinum debut in the process, launching a career that's still active in production and music today.
They be stuffing me every damn day, man. They can't get enough of me.
Number 4. Mac Dre. Andre Hicks, known as Mac Dre, was arrested in Fresno, California in 1992 and charged with conspiracy to commit bank robbery, allegedly connected to a local crew authorities called the Romper Room Gang, a name investigators tied to his own record label, Romp Productions, and the frequent references to Romper Room scattered throughout his early lyrics. He was eventually sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Rather than let incarceration end his recording career, Mac Dre found a workaround nobody had really attempted before. He began recording entire songs directly over the jail's inmate telephone system, dictating verses and hooks to collaborators on the outside who pieced the tracks together. Prosecutors actually used some of his lyrics from these jailhouse recordings as evidence during his own trial, treating his own music as testimony against him in open court.
Listen to a Mac rhyme.
Undeterred, Mac Dre kept going, recording material both at Fresno County Jail and later at USP Lompoc Federal Prison, eventually compiling enough phone-recorded material to release both an EP, Back in the Hood, in 1992, and his full debut album, Young Black Brother, in 1993.
Fuck with a black time. I'm talking real, man. Listen to a Mac rhyme.
Largely built from vocals captured entirely over a prison payphone, with producer Kyrie piecing the sessions together on the outside. One of those jailhouse recordings, Punk Police, directly named and taunted a specific Vallejo police detective, mocking the department's own inability to solve a string of local bank robberies, while Mac Dre himself sat behind bars for exactly that crime.
I can't spit on the sidewalk. They roughing and cuffing me.
He was released from federal prison in August of 1996 and went on to found Thiz Entertainment, becoming one of the most influential figures in the entire Bay Area hyphy movement before his murder in a 2004 drive-by shooting in Kansas City. An entire hip-hop album, built from vocals recorded over a jail payphone, with prosecutors listening to some of the exact same lyrics as courtroom evidence, became the commercially biggest release of his entire early career, launching a legacy that still defines an entire regional sound today. Number 3. Run DMC. Run DMC's co-manager, Lyor Cohen, invited an Adidas executive named Angelo Anastasio to the group's July 19, 1986 concert at Madison Square Garden. hoping to turn the group's obvious, genuine love of Adidas superstar sneakers into an actual business relationship, rather than just a lyrical tribute. According to group member DMC, Adidas had noticed a real spike in East Coast sneaker sales in the months leading up to that show, but had no clear idea what was actually driving it before that specific night at the Garden. During the group's performance of their new single, My Adidas, released as the lead track from their album Raising Hell, Run instructed the entire 40,000-person crowd to remove their own sneakers and hold them up in the air together. Anastasio watched as a sea of Adidas apparel rose across Madison Square Garden. An unmistakable, entirely unpaid demonstration of the brand's grip on hip-hop culture, happening in real time, directly in front of him, something no marketing survey could have shown as convincingly. The group followed up with a short a cappella video directly addressing Adidas by name, ending with a blunt on-camera demand for $1 million, delivered almost as a dare. It worked. Adidas signed Run DMC to a $1 million endorsement deal that same year, becoming the first time any musical act in any genre had ever received a major athletic sneaker endorsement. Years before any other artist outside of professional sports would get a similar deal from a company like that. A song written purely because three guys from Hollis, Queens, genuinely loved their own sneakers, wearing them without laces long before they ever had a record deal, ended up inventing an entire category of business partnership that simply hadn't existed anywhere in music before that single concert. Number 2. Eazy-E. When Dr. Dre left Ruthless Records to co-found Death Row in 1991, the split turned bitter almost immediately, with Suge Knight reportedly using intimidation tactics to force Eazy-E into releasing Dre from his existing contract. Eazy responded by filing a lawsuit against Dre, Suge Knight, and their new label, accusing them of using threats and force to break his existing recording agreements. A legal dispute that dragged on for months, while Dre was actively working on what would become his own solo debut. Interscope Records, Death Row's parent label, wanted the entire dispute settled quietly before Dre's upcoming solo album, The Chronic, hit stores, worried about the negative press a public feud between two former NWA members could generate right at launch. A settlement was reached that gave Eazy-E a genuine financial stake going forward. According to a 2015 oral history of Death Row Records, Eazy secured 10% of Dre's future production revenue and 15% of his solo record revenue, on top of an immediate cash payout, reportedly netting him an estimated $1.5 million from The Chronic's sales before his death in 1995. A sum that continued accumulating even after Eazy was gone. The irony was almost too perfect. The Chronic's own opening track features Dre directly mocking Eazy-E by name, using the album's very first moments to settle old scores publicly. And Eazy fired back the following year with his own diss record, aimed squarely back at Dre and the entire Death Row camp. Both men were, at the exact same time, actively profiting off one another financially while trading insults on wax in front of millions of fans who had no idea a legal settlement was quietly running in the background of it all. A rapper who got publicly dissed on one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time ended up getting paid directly from that very same album's success, thanks to a lawsuit settlement negotiated months before it even came out, turning a public feud into a strange, unspoken business partnership.
Something about this crack, this weed, and my hustling niggas.
Number 1. The Notorious B.I.G.
Track, not your wig push back. Rule number uno, never let.
DJ Premier originally built the beat behind 10 Crack Commandments for something far smaller than a Biggie classic, a promotional trailer for Angie Martinez's Hot 5 at 9 segment on New York's Hot 97 radio station, intended purely as a short, disposable piece of radio branding.
Stay the fuck from police. If niggas think you're snitching, they ain't trying to listen.
Gang star associate Jeru the Damaja recorded the very first vocal ever laid over that beat, a short promotional freestyle meant to run between songs on the radio, nothing more than a quick station identifier.
Properly gassed up, hoodie the masked up, for that fast.
Sean Puffy Combs happened to be at the Hot 97 studios when the promo aired, heard the beat, and immediately called Premier to secure it for the Notorious B.I.G. Instead, recognizing something in the track that its own creator hadn't originally built it for.
When you pass, your girl fuck my man Jacob. Heard in 3 weeks.
For the actual lyrics, Biggie drew direct inspiration from a real 1994 Source magazine article by writer Kari Kimani Turner, which had included a list titled A Crack Dealer's 10 Crack Commandments, as part of a broader piece examining a full decade of the crack epidemic's impact on New York City communities.
Keep no weight on you. Them cats that squeeze your guns can hold jumps too.
The finished song, recorded for Biggie's 1997 album Life After Death, abandoned the traditional 16-bar verse structure entirely and skipped a chorus altogether, becoming one of the most structurally unusual and critically respected songs of his entire catalog, a genuinely experimental choice for what became one of his most beloved tracks.
If they want an ounce, tell them bounce. Number 6, that goddamn crack.
Billboard would later rank it among the 25 greatest songs of Biggie's career, and Broadway composer Lin-Manuel Miranda paid direct homage to it years later in Hamilton with his own song, 10 Dual Commandments, introducing the beat's legacy to an entirely new generation of theater audiences who may have never even heard the original.
She be laying in the bushes to light that ass up. Number 4.
One of the most respected songs in hip-hop history started its life as a throwaway radio jingle, given away for free between commercial breaks on a local New York station, before Puffy happened to be standing in the right room at exactly the right moment to change its entire destiny.